The smell of burnt toast and rushed coffee filled the kitchen as I scraped eggs into lunchboxes, shouting over the chaos, "Shoes! Where are your shoes?" My youngest was chasing the dog with a banana, my middle child was pouting about missing socks, and the oldest insisted she had a science project due that she definitely mentioned last week. It was a Thursday that could have been any other, until the phone rang. I almost didn't hear it over the noise. The screen read, "Mayless." I blinked. My mother didn't call. Not for birthdays, not for anniversaries, not even when my appendix burst 6 years ago. I hesitated a second too long, and it went to voicemail. Bryn glanced up from buttering toast, eyebrow raised. "Everything okay?" I didn't answer. I hit redial. She picked up on the first ring. "Narina, sweetheart, how are you?" I stared at the wall, unsure if someone had swapped my mother with a body double. Her voice was chipper, like a woman on a game show. "I'm good," I replied, drawing out the word like a question. "We were thinking," she continued, "your anniversary's coming up, isn't it?" Now I knew I was being punked. "It is." "Well," she said brightly, "your father and I would love to watch the kids so you and Bryn can go out. You deserve a night." Bryn actually froze mid-bite. The room went quiet. "They're offering to babysit," I said after I hung up. He stared at me. "Your parents?" I nodded slowly. He put his toast down. "Why now?" That question hung over us like fog. After we got the kids off to school, I sat on the porch swing, phone in hand, thumb hovering over Indira's name. My sister had cut ties with our parents years ago. I still kept the thread loose, mostly for the kids, birthday cards, occasional awkward dinners. She picked up on the second ring. "They want to babysit." There was a pause. Then, "Don't let your need for a mother blind you again." "I'm not—" "Yes, you are." Her voice was calm. "You always have." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. Not really. "Maybe they're trying to change." She sighed, that deep exhale of someone who's seen this movie before. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I didn't reply. I stared out at the dog pawing the garden bed, trying to dig up whatever he'd buried last week. Maybe people changed. Maybe. Saturday came. Bryn had made reservations at the restaurant where we had our first date. I wore the blue wrap dress he liked. For the first time in months, I felt something close to alive. At exactly 5:59 p.m., the doorbell rang. My parents were early. That in itself was alarming. Mayless was wearing perfume that smelled vaguely of nostalgia and holding a Tupperware container of cookies. "Homemade," she beamed. I noticed the grocery store label peeking out from beneath the plastic wrap. Astral stood beside her, unusually stiff, gripping a large navy canvas bag. Bryn reached to take it from him. Here, I'll—" "No," Astral said quickly, jerking it back. We both froze. He forced a smile. "I've got it." My eyes narrowed, but I let it go. The kids were excited, bouncing around the living room, asking for screen time and sugar. Mayless crouched, pulling them into hugs, using nicknames I'd never heard her say before. "There's my pumpkin, and my little sunshine." She never used to remember their birthdays. My daughter, 6 and sharp as a tack, whispered to me as I adjusted her hairband. "Grandma says I'll have a new name on our trip." I blinked. "What?" "She said I'd be Stella Rose." I forced a laugh. "She's just being silly." But the back of my neck prickled. Bryn stood by the door, not saying anything, but his eyes were on the bag Astral had placed in the hallway. It was too large for a single night. Mayless clapped her hands. "Go enjoy your night, lovebirds. We've got it all handled." I forced a smile. "Right. Okay." We grabbed our coats. I looked back at the bag, then at my daughter, already snuggled next to Mayless on the couch. Astral was scrolling through his phone, not watching the kids but watching the door. Bryn leaned in. "You good?" I nodded, but I wasn't. As we stepped onto the porch, I said quietly, "I just want to peek inside the bag." Bryn sighed. "Now?" "Just give me a second." I reached for the zipper. Link to next chapter. I told myself I'd just peek inside the bag and leave it at that. I should have known better. I hadn't meant to unzip the bag, just look. Maybe touch the corner. But I stopped myself. Not because I was calm, because I wasn't ready to see whatever truth waited inside. Bryn and I stepped back inside to grab our keys. The kids were upstairs getting into pajamas, and Malis was in the kitchen humming a hymn I hadn't heard since childhood. Astral stood by the hallway, arms folded, eyes on the clock. "I'll get the coats," I said, heading for the stairs. Bryn trailed behind, but I felt him slow as we passed the navy canvas bag again. We both avoided saying anything. We were acting like two people tiptoeing around a sleeping bear. At the top of the stairs, our youngest came barreling toward me, barefoot, clutching a piece of construction paper covered in glitter and marker. "I made you something," she beamed. I smiled, kneeling to take it. "Let me see, sweetheart." She had drawn a stick figure family, herself, her brothers, Malis, Astral. No Bryn, no me. And next to the girl figure, she had carefully written, "Stella." I blinked. "Who's Stella?" She giggled. "That's my new name." "Your new what?" "Grandma said when we go to Florida, I'll be Stella Rose. It's prettier." Bryn stopped beside us. "Florida?" She nodded innocently. "Nana says it's sunny there, and we'll have a pool." I could barely hold the paper. My fingers went cold. Bryn crouched down beside her. "Baby, what else did Nana say?" "She said, if someone asks, I'm Lucy. I'm 5. I live with my grandma and grandpa." She recited it like the Pledge of Allegiance. I looked at Bryn. His face didn't move, but his eyes did, sharp and narrow. I hugged her tight, forcing my voice to stay soft. "Why don't you go show that to Nana?" As she skipped off, I stood. Bryn whispered, "What the hell is this?" "I don't know," I said. "But we're not leaving." We walked downstairs together. The smell of cookies had filled the air again, artificial and warm. Malis turned to us. Forget something?" "We're running a bit behind," I said casually, reaching for my phone. "Texting the restaurant." Astral's hand twitched. "You two go," Malis insisted, her tone edged with something unfamiliar. "Enjoy your night." "Maybe we'll stay for one drink," Bryn offered. "We haven't seen the kids in jammies all week." Astral looked at him. "You said you had reservations." "Plans change," Bryn said flatly. I sat on the couch beside my middle son, who was glued to a tablet. My daughter climbed into my lap. "What did Nana mean by new name?" I asked softly. She shrugged. "She said some families start over, like we're moving." I glanced across the room. Malis smiled at me, lips thin, eyes glinting. Bryn pulled me aside a few minutes later near the hallway. "This isn't normal." "I know. We can't leave them." I wasn't planning to. We returned to the living room. I picked up the remote, pretended to scroll through streaming apps. "Let's watch a short movie before bed." Astral cleared his throat. "Shouldn't you two be on the road by now?" "In a minute," I smiled. Malis busied herself at the counter. Her voice was too light. "Your father's just tired." Bryn and I moved to the kitchen. "We're staying," I said. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "I'm not comfortable leaving." "You think we'd hurt them?" she asked, voice tightening. "I think they're learning things I didn't approve." She folded her arms. "You've always been dramatic. And you've always had a script. I'm not reading from it anymore." She didn't answer, just turned, wiping crumbs into her hand. Later that evening, after pretending to pour myself a drink, I stepped outside onto the porch and called Leora. "Quick question," I said. "If something ever feels off, would you trust your gut or your upbringing?" There was silence, then a dry chuckle. "You already know the answer." "Your gut's trying to save your life." I looked back at the front door, barely ajar. The hallway light cut across the bag. I took a breath. I'm going to check that damn thing. Link to next chapter. I took 3 steps toward the bag, every cell in my body screaming, this wasn't a normal night. I closed the front door as gently as I could, locking it with one hand and keeping my breath steady. The kids were occupied, Malis humming a lullaby that never belonged to her generation, and Astral pretending to scroll through a news app, though his screen brightness had been off for 10 minutes. "I'm going to fix my lipstick," I said aloud, holding up my phone like a shield. No one answered. Good. Upstairs, I locked the bathroom door, turned the faucet just enough to let it whisper, and leaned against the sink. The tile was cold beneath my bare feet, and for a moment, all I heard was the rhythm of water and my own heartbeat. I opened my messages. Me. What did you mean when you said, "Don't let your need for a mother blind you again"? The typing bubble came almost instantly. Indira. She used to write the same thing about me before I left. Your kids are my second chance. Like we were failed prototypes. You're just the next experiment. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I scrolled. Years ago, Malis had sent me a birthday card. On the back, she'd scribbled, "You gave me what I couldn't be to Indira. Let me do it right this time." At the time, I thought it was sweet. Now it read like a threat. I closed my eyes, and memory betrayed me. It was the winter of '98. I was maybe 9. Snowstorm had hit hard, school was canceled, and I'd refused to wear the boots Malis had picked out. Ugly, stiff, 2 sizes too big. I'd insisted on my sneakers. "You don't get to disobey and stay warm," she'd said. Then she'd locked me outside. No coat, no gloves, just the porch light and my own stubborn breath freezing in the air. I sat curled up behind a snow shovel, waiting for morning or mercy, whichever came first. I hadn't told anyone. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Until 2 weeks ago, when Bryn had come across an old USB labeled Home Video Archive while cleaning out the basement. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, he'd plugged it in, and there it was. Footage from an old camcorder Malis used to leave running to catch memories. The timestamp said 9:42 p.m. In the video, I was visible through the window, huddled outside, knees drawn up, breath fogging against my bare arms. The camera zoomed in, and someone behind the lens whispered, "She's still not sorry." Bryn hadn't shown me then. He told me last night, voice quiet, eyes heavy. "I thought it would break you." It didn't. It anchored me. "They're not trying to be grandparents," I told him now, standing in the kitchen while the kids colored quietly nearby. "They're trying to erase us." He didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded. "They call it love," I went on softer, "but it's ownership, rewriting. They renamed our daughter without telling us, gave her a new address, a fake life. What kind of person plans a kidnapping with crayons?" Bryn's voice was hard. "They think they're saving her from us." I swallowed. "Then they're sicker than we ever knew." I told him everything Indira had texted. His hand tightened on the back of the chair, knuckles white. "We cancel the dinner. Stay close to the kids." We did. Later that evening, I walked back into the living room. Malis sat on the rug with the children, holding a book I'd never seen before. Her tone was too smooth, like she was reading for an audience, every word perfectly placed. Too perfect. Astral stood by the window, phone in hand. It buzzed twice. He silenced it without looking. I walked into the kitchen, told myself I needed water. The fridge hummed softly. That's when I saw it. A sticky note, bright yellow, stuck to the fridge door at eye level. I hadn't placed it there. Neither had Bryn. In scratchy cursive, the kind Malis used when writing grocery lists or labeling jars, it read, "Stella, pack your favorite toy. We leave soon." I didn't breathe. My hands went cold. The sound of my pulse grew louder than the fridge. I hadn't packed a bag, but my daughter had, under someone else's name. I didn't go to sleep that night. I lay in the hallway outside the nursery with a pillow under my back and my phone clenched in one hand, eyes fixed on the sliver of light beneath the bedroom door. I listened. For feet. For hushed voices. For anything that suggested movement that didn't belong. At some point, just before sunrise, I heard it. A whisper. Soft. Too soft to catch fully, but enough to pull me upright. I crept to the nursery and opened the door quietly. Malis was crouched beside my daughter, stroking her hair. "I was just checking on her," she said without turning. From the floor, she stood, dusted off her knees, and walked out past me without another word. By the time the sun came up, I was done pretending. I stepped into the living room with coffee I hadn't tasted and spotted Malis whispering again, this time to my youngest, holding a folded piece of paper in her small fist. Astral sat nearby, watching them, until he caught my eye. He stood abruptly and reached for the paper. I'll take that, I said, extending my hand. Astral hesitated, then smiled thinly. Just helping her draw. I unfolded it slowly, scrawled across the top. Emergency pickup plan. Exit through garage, no shoes. My fingers didn't shake, not this time. What is this? I asked, holding it toward Malis. She didn't flinch. We're just helping her feel safe. You think planning her escape is safe? She's been anxious lately. We thought it might help her feel in control. You mean feel controlled? I corrected. The way Malis looked at me then, I hadn't seen that version of her in years. Not since she screamed at me for applying to a college 3 states away. Not since she slammed the front door behind me when I moved out with only $78 and a duffel bag. You're being paranoid, she said. No, I'm being awake. That night, over the pretense of a toast, I watched them. Bryn played along, raised his glass, smiled tight. I sat between them like I was made of glass. So, I said lightly, what made you offer to babysit now, after all this time? Malis tilted her head, smile too soft to be genuine. We realized how much we've missed. And how much time we've lost, Astral added. I watched them closely. Right, but why now? Astral didn't hesitate. We won't let that happen again. This time, we're ready. Malis shot him a look, a very quick, very telling look. What do you mean by ready? I asked, setting my glass down. Ready to be the grandparents we should have been, she said quickly. Mothers just give birth, Astral said. Grandmothers raise them right. The words hung in the air like poison. I didn't respond. I excused myself instead, pretending to check on the baby monitor, and as I stepped into the hallway, I heard Astral's voice, low, clipped. No, we'll bring them. The others are waiting. It's all planned. I stopped at the corner. My stomach twisted. We'll take the highway straight out. She won't even notice till it's done. He ended the call as I stepped into view. Business, he said, like it explained everything. You wouldn't understand. I walked away without speaking. But inside, something cracked clean down the middle. Back in the living room, a scrapbook sat open on the table. I hadn't noticed it before. I flipped the pages. Photos of the kids, at the park, eating cake, opening presents. No Bryn, no me. Captions written beneath each one. First steps with Grandma. Beach day with Papa. I turned another page. A sticky note. Include in custody folder. My chest tightened. My daughter's graduation photo. Malis had pushed past us that day, insisting on a front row seat. We'd laughed it off, blamed classic Malis. Now I saw it differently. That wasn't eagerness. That was entitlement. That was possession. Later, when the house had quieted, I pulled Malis aside in the kitchen. Don't speak to my children alone again. She blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. You're tired, she said, eyes narrowing. You'll see things differently when you rest. I stood taller. No. I see everything perfectly now. That night, I asked Bryn to check the trunk of our car. He did. And then he called me out to see for myself. 3 small suitcases, labeled with masking tape. Stella, Michael, Daniel. Inside each, toiletries, pajamas, books, a favorite stuffed animal. I turned slowly, heart thudding. Malis stood behind us. Why were you in our car? I asked. Her smile was so calm it terrified me. To make sure the bags were ready. Link to next chapter. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the hallway from the nursery door, waiting for a sound I couldn't explain, but knew was coming. I didn't close my eyes once that night. I lay curled on the twin mattress beside my daughter, listening to the slight wheeze in her breathing, counting the turns of the ceiling fan like it might ground me. Bryn sat in the hallway just outside, laptop open on his knees, his eyes locked on the feed from the security cameras he'd installed after that string of neighborhood break-ins last year. I'd rolled my eyes back then, said we didn't live in the kind of world where we needed to watch our own front yard at all hours. I was wrong. At exactly 2:14 a.m., the nursery camera caught Malis standing over the crib, not tucking in a blanket, not whispering a lullaby, just watching. No movement, no words, just her pale figure, frozen in place like she was waiting for something I couldn't name. Bryn turned the screen toward me. "You still want to wait?" I didn't answer. My silence said enough. By morning, I was already in the kitchen, cracking eggs and measuring flour with military precision. Bryn poured coffee. Neither of us spoke much. Malis walked in, humming that same hymn again. I watched her wipe her hands with the same dish rag she used to smack the table when I was 12. She looked at the kids like she already owned them. "No toast today?" she asked cheerfully. "We're short on time," I replied. "Busy morning." Astral appeared behind her, always 2 steps behind, but with that quiet conviction in his gaze like he thought it was his house, his kitchen, his timeline. I cracked another egg, set the whisk down, and said, "You won't be staying tonight." Malis turned slowly. "Excuse me?" I faced them fully. "We'll call if we ever need help again, but this ends today." Bryn put down his mug, stood beside me. There was a flicker behind Malis's eyes, shock followed quickly by practiced offense. "You're tired," she said. "Let's not make decisions we'll regret." Astral's jaw tightened. "This is your ego talking." I reached into the drawer, pulled out a folded paper. "I got a call this morning," I said, handing it to them. It was a printed screenshot from my friend Leora, head administrator at St. Michael's Prep, a formal enrollment confirmation under the name Stella Grant. "Why is my daughter enrolled at a school I never applied to?" I asked, voice even. Malis looked at the paper. "We're making long-term plans. You've been stretched thin." "Planning to kidnap her is your idea of help?" I asked. Astral's voice dropped an octave. "We're protecting her from the chaos you live in." "No," I said. "You're stealing her. There's a difference." It was like something in the room fractured. No one moved. Even the kids had gone quiet, instinctively sensing the shift in temperature. "You'll never be alone with them again," I said, finally. "Ever." Malis turned to Bryn. "She's making a mistake." Bryn didn't flinch. "We agree." "You're choosing her over your own blood?" Astral asked him. Bryn raised an eyebrow. "You forged a legal document. You drugged our trust. That's not family. That's fraud." That broke the silence. Malis's calm mask slipped for just a second, just long enough for me to see what she really was underneath. Later, as they sat stiffly on the porch, pretending nothing happened, I went upstairs and dug out every letter, every form, every file, photos of the packed bags, screenshots of the enrollment form, that sticky note on the fridge. I piled it all into a folder. I called Leora. "I think I need a lawyer." There was a pause. Then her voice, quiet and calm. "Then you already know what they were trying to do." I did. Mid-morning, I walked back into the kitchen. Malis's phone sat on the counter, unlocked. I didn't ask for permission. I tapped it open and checked the calendar app. One entry stared back at me in bold letters. Departure, 9:45 a.m. Window opens if couple leaves early. I looked up. The microwave clock read 9:38. I stepped into the hallway. Malis was kneeling by the front door, fastening my daughter's shoes. Astral held the keys. I didn't think. I ran faster than I ever have, not toward danger, but toward my children, who had no idea they were seconds from being stolen. I launched myself across the hallway just in time to see Malis ushering the kids out the front door. My daughter already had one foot off the porch, clutching her favorite stuffed giraffe like they were headed for a trip we'd approved. Astral stood behind them, holding the car key like it was a passport. "Where are you going?" I shouted, louder than I intended. Malis turned, all serene and sweetness. "They were just getting some air before your dinner." I moved faster than I'd thought possible, grabbing my daughter by the waist and pulling her back inside while Bryn scooped up the boys. I slammed the door shut, locked the deadbolt with a metallic click that sounded louder than thunder in that moment. Astral stepped forward from the hallway, voice cold, flat. "That wasn't the plan." "The plan?" I snapped. "You made a plan." Bryn moved past me toward the hallway, his gaze fixed on the large duffel bag that had been sitting too long by the stairs. We had ignored it, dismissed it, until now. Without a word, he knelt and unzipped it. Inside were 3 laminated passports. each with a different name, but our children's photos. A bottle of children's Benadryl, unopened. A GPS tracker. And a flash drive labeled in Melis's loopy cursive, Family Memories. Bryn held up the passports, his hand shaking. They weren't just going for air. I grabbed my phone, dialing with fingers that trembled, but a voice that didn't. 911, what is your emergency? My parents are trying to abduct our kids, I said. I have proof, fake documents, drugs. Please send help. Now. Within minutes, the flashing lights lit up the street. Astral met the officers in the driveway, voice coated in patience. This is a misunderstanding. We're family. Melis chimed in behind him, arms crossed. We've been cut out of their lives. This is a desperate attempt to reconnect. But the police weren't buying it. They separated everyone. I handed over the passports, the medication, the flash drive, and a printed copy of the calendar entry I'd found on Melis's phone. I showed them the screenshots of the school enrollment, the suitcases packed without our consent. One officer read the forged custody letter I hadn't even noticed before, tucked in the side pouch of the duffel. It says you're entering a rehab facility and relinquishing temporary custody to them. I never wrote that. I've never even seen it. They believed me. The detective nodded to his partner, who handcuffed Astral first, then Melis. She didn't cry. She didn't resist. She just stared at me like I'd ruined her dream. Don't do this, she said softly. I'm not the one who did this, I replied. You are. As they were escorted to the cruiser, Bryn leaned over to whisper, You okay? I shook my head. Not yet. The children sat quietly on the couch. My daughter's eyes were wide, her fingers wrapped tightly around her giraffe. Are Grandma and Grandpa bad now? She asked. I knelt in front of her. They made a very bad choice, but you're safe now, that's what matters. She nodded slowly, and I pulled her into my arms. This time, I let my voice shake. The officers moved in and out, collecting evidence. One detective returned from the car, holding the duffel. We'll need the rest of this. Bryn flipped open one of the passports again, eyes narrowing. It's her, he said, handing it to me. My daughter's picture smiled back at me, but the name printed beneath it wasn't hers. Stella Rose Carlyle. They hadn't just packed bags. They had renamed our children. Link to next chapter. It wasn't just that they were ready to take them. It was that they'd already renamed them. The morning after their arrest felt strangely still. There were no slammed doors, no voices down the hallway, no artificial sweetness wafting from the kitchen. Just silence. Not the peaceful kind. This was the quiet that comes after a storm when the wreckage is still fresh, but the thunder's already spent. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching Bryn flip through footage on his laptop, frame by frame. The kids had stayed home from school, curled up in the living room with snacks and cartoons they barely watched. Their eyes wandered often. So did mine. Leora called just after 8. I pulled everything, she said. They booked 3 one-way tickets to Tallahassee under the names Stella, Michael, and Daniel Grant, paid in cash. Email confirmation hit their inboxes the morning they offered to babysit. I rubbed my forehead. Was there ever a version of this where they just asked? Bryn didn't look up. No. That was never the point. By noon, the local paper had picked up the story. A headline sat on my screen like a wound that wouldn't close. Grandparents arrested in alleged attempted abduction of their own grandchildren. My inbox flooded. Colleagues, neighbors, college friends from years back. Some messages were kind. Others, not so much. One email stood out. A name I barely remembered. An old PTA contact. The subject line read, "She always gave me the creeps." Inside, a single sentence. She once told me, "Blood always reclaims its own." Then came the call from the police station. "Did you know your mother rented a cabin up in Woodland Springs?" the officer asked. "Delivered a commercial freezer the day before the arrest." A chill prickled my skin. "No, I didn't." "It was premeditated," he said flatly. "All of it." Later that day, we sat in our living room while CPS conducted interviews. The woman who came was gentle but firm, eyes sharp despite her soft voice. She asked about our home, our routines, the children's history with my parents. They tried to enroll your daughter under the name Stella Rose Carlisle at a private school 2 towns over. 3 weeks ago, she told us, flipping through her notes. Do you know about that? I nodded. We found out last night. You responded quickly, she said. That may have saved your kids. But then came the question that stayed with me. Why didn't you report the signs earlier? How do you report suspicion when it's dressed in handmade cookies and lullabies? When it says please and thank you and brings store-bought flowers to hide its rot? I didn't answer. I don't think I could have. The ripple widened. Some relatives called me ungrateful. They just wanted time with the kids, one uncle emailed. Is that such a crime? Others reached out in whispers, quiet thank yous for doing what they couldn't. One even wrote, "You've done what I was too afraid to do for my own daughter." I found a small bouquet of wildflowers on our porch. No note, but I knew who it was from. Our neighbor, the one who used to chat with Malis over the fence but never invited her inside. Then came the real gut punch, a forwarded email from the church office. Subject: Urgent prayer request for family in crisis. Malis had written to the pastor days before her arrest. Please pray for the children. Their mother is emotionally unstable and dangerous. We're doing what we must to free them. I read it 3 times before handing the phone to Bryn. This wasn't just manipulation, I said. They weren't just grooming the kids, they were grooming everyone. That night, after I put the kids to bed, I checked my email one last time before collapsing into the couch. A new message. No subject. From Detective Harlan. We reviewed the USB labeled Birthday. You need to see this. The attached file played grainy footage. My living room, my children, and my parents. Malis sat on the couch, her arm around my daughter. Astral paced behind them, speaking softly. You don't need to be scared, Malis said in the video. Soon we'll be safe. Soon you'll forget the shouting, the rushing. You'll forget how mommy always leaves. Astral knelt in front of the camera. Say your new names again. My son's voice. I'm Michael, my daughter. I'm Stella. Then silence. Just Malis whispering. Forget your parents. I closed the laptop. Bryn stood in the doorway, arms crossed. This wasn't an act of love, I said. No, he agreed. It was erasure. Link to next chapter. There's no heartbreak like being told your own child was prepped to forget your face. The courtroom was silent when the video began to play. I sat frozen, fists clenched in my lap, knees barely touching Bryn's. Seraphine leaned slightly forward at our side, eyes locked on the flat screen mounted to the right of the judge. In front of us, the prosecutor pressed play. The timestamp on the video read, March 4th, 7:03 p.m. It showed our living room. My daughter sat on the couch, a coloring book in her lap, eyes glued to Malis beside her. Malis's voice filled the room. You'll be safe soon. Mommy will understand one day. Astral stood behind them, pacing slowly. Say it again, he said. My son's voice was the first. I'm Michael. Then my daughter. I'm Stella. I live with Nana and Papa. The prosecutor paused the video. The courtroom didn't breathe. Malis, 2 rows back, didn't flinch. Astral stared ahead like a man watching someone else's trial. This, the prosecutor said, is not confusion. It is preparation. This is not affection. It is erasure. I stared forward, unmoving, not because I was numb, because I'd never been so clear. This wasn't delusion. This was doctrine. After the hearing, Seraphine met us in her office, file folders spread across her desk like open wounds. You have overwhelming evidence for custodial interference, psychological manipulation, child endangerment, she said calmly. We can file criminal charges, civil damages, restraining orders, all of it. I hesitated. I'm not sure I want to make it worse, I said. For the kids. Bryn's voice was quiet. They already chose war, Narina. You're just ending it. I closed my eyes, then nodded once. Later that week, Malis's sister invited me to a family peace meeting. She said it like it was a potluck. I walked in knowing exactly what would happen. The moment I stepped into the living room of a cousin I barely spoke to, I saw the lineup. 2 aunts, 1 uncle, 3 cousins, a pastor, and a folding chair in the middle for me. "You're still family," someone said. "Blood is thicker than this," said another. I let them speak. Then I stood, pulled the USB from my coat pocket, walked to the TV, and plugged it in. "This," I said, "is what your silence let grow." They watched. Most didn't make it to the end. I handed out copies of Melis's email to the pastor, one where she'd written, "Pray for the children. Their mother is emotionally unstable. We must save them." Half the room walked out. The other half finally shut up. That night, back home, my daughter sat at the kitchen table, drawing again. This time, I saw my name in the top corner. "Mama?" she asked. "Will they come back?" "Not if I can help it," I said. My son piped up from across the room, voice steady. "I don't want a new name." "I like mine." I nodded, turning away before they could see the tear fall. The next day, Seraphine filed a formal civil complaint. Bryn filed the restraining orders. The detective met us at the station. "It's done," he said. "This case is on record. There's no coming back from this." We nodded. We didn't smile. That evening, while sorting scanned documents on my laptop, I found an unfamiliar file synced from Melis's iCloud, an unsent email draft. "If she won't give them to us, we'll make it look like she's unfit. We've done it before." I closed the lid without breathing, not in shock, in finality. They never loved me. They just thought they owned me. Link to next chapter. You don't mourn what was stolen. You defend what was almost lost. The house didn't feel like mine when we walked back in. It felt hollow, airless, like it had been evacuated of warmth. The kids slipped off their shoes in the foyer without a word. Bryn headed to the garage and returned with the toolbox. He didn't say what he was doing, but I heard the drill buzz from upstairs, the extra locks going on the bedroom doors. My daughter followed me into our room. Her voice barely lifted. "Can I sleep here tonight?" "Of course," I said, patting the space beside me. "You don't have to ask." She crawled in, curled up, and said nothing else. Neither did I. The next morning, I took her for a walk. We didn't go far, just around the neighborhood, past Mrs. Dempsey's house with the wind chimes and the front garden she always replanted too early in the season. After a block and a half, my daughter tugged on my sleeve. "Are Grandma and Grandpa in timeout?" Something like that. "Will they still love me?" The question cracked something inside me. "Yes," I said carefully. "But their love, it got twisted, and that's not your fault. It's not about you at all." She nodded, slow and unsure, then reached for my hand. Back home, Bryn sat at the kitchen table scrolling through his email. "They submitted fake medical records," he said quietly, "to a pediatrician in Mexico, under the kids' aliases." I stared at him. "When?" "The same day they booked the flights. They weren't going for a week. They were going forever." Twist S22. And it hit like a brick to the sternum. It took hours to settle the kids down. I sat on the porch for a few minutes, watching the breeze shift the trees like nothing happened. I could feel eyes from the house across the street. Could almost hear the whispers from next door. At the school drop-off line the next day, a mother pulled me aside. "I saw the article. I don't even know what to say. I would have never guessed." "Neither did I replied. "But thank you," she added. "For protecting your kids." I didn't know how to respond to that. I wasn't sure what I'd done was heroic. I still didn't know what it had cost. That night, while packing up their backpacks, I found a drawing stuffed into the bottom of my daughter's bag. Stick figures and crayon. 5 people, 3 kids, 2 adults. But the mother was drawn off to the side, behind a wall. A single blue tear next to her face. "They didn't just try to steal my children," I whispered to Bryn. "They tried to make them grieve me before they'd even lost me." He said nothing, but his hand found mine. Later, while Bryn read to the boys, I opened Melis's laptop, which had been left behind. The password field stared at me. I glanced at my daughter. "Do you know Grandma's password?" She nodded and typed it in. It opened instantly. I didn't know what chilled me more, that she knew it or that she expected it to work. Twist S20. The depth of their conditioning ran deeper than I had feared. The following afternoon, I met again with Child Protective Services. I handed them updated affidavits, gave them the school correspondence, the calendar entries, the passport scans. A counselor was assigned to each child. We scheduled therapy twice a week. After the meeting, Bryn drove us to pick up groceries. In the parking lot, as we sat in the car, he turned to me. "They took their shot," he said. "Now we rebuild." I smiled faintly, but didn't agree. Rebuilding implied something had been broken. What we'd had wasn't a house of cards. It was a house built with stolen bricks. That night, the kids went down without protest. Bryn stayed up to finish work while I sorted through digital files on my laptop. As I was about to shut it, my phone buzzed. Voicemail from the jail system. "You have a pending message from Malus Hawthorne." I didn't hit play. I didn't need to hear it. But what caught me wasn't the message. It was the caller ID. It didn't say mom. It said, "Inmate number 4521. And for the first time, I felt something close to peace. Link to next chapter. I didn't hit play, but her voice still echoed in my head, and that was almost worse. Courtrooms smell like stale air and paper. Everything about them is calculated. Angles of the benches, the way sound carries, how your own footsteps make you feel smaller. I sat next to Bryn in the front row, Seraphine to my left. She looked sharper than usual, all hard lines and steel voice, but it wasn't for show. It was for blood. The judge read the charges like they were grocery items. Attempted custodial interference, false documentation, endangerment of minors. The retired nurse who lived down the street had been called to testify. I hadn't expected that. "She asked me," the woman said. "Malus asked me what kind of over-the-counter medicine could be used to calm a child for a long car ride. Then she asked about dosage for someone under 30 pounds. No one said a word. Then came the evidence. The fake passports, the printed emails, the handwritten school transfer forms, and the birthday video we'd all watched far too many times now. The judge leaned forward. This was deliberate, this was coordinated, and this was an extraordinary betrayal of the most basic responsibilities of kinship. When she slammed the gavel down, I didn't cry, I didn't cheer. I exhaled. After court, we walked out into a wall of reporters. I didn't answer any questions. Bryn steered us to the car like a man guarding a secret. Our kids were waiting at home. That was the only place I needed to be. That night, our inboxes filled with everything you can imagine. Some called me a monster for turning in my own parents. Others called me brave. A few offered to buy me coffee anytime you want to talk. I didn't reply to any of them. One subject line simply read, "Better they be known for what they did than remembered as what they never were." Bryn had written it, to himself. He left it open on the desktop for me to find. The next morning, Seraphine handed me a thick manila folder. Inside was a notebook subpoenaed from Malus's personal belongings. On the inside cover, in her familiar, perfect script, she had written, "She was only a vessel, a carrier. The children are the true legacy." I read the sentence twice, then 3 more times. There it was, not in whispers or actions, but in her own handwriting. I had spent years being gaslit, doubting every instinct, thinking maybe I was too sensitive or too angry or too dramatic. Turns out, I wasn't dramatic enough. Later that week, our kids started therapy. Real sessions, not the Pinterest-guided kind. I dropped them off and waited outside with a coffee and nothing to do but breathe. I started volunteering at school again. The staff was warmer now. I wasn't the one with the messy family. I was involved. A woman on the school board pulled me aside after a morning assembly. "We're hosting a parent panel on child safety," she said. "Would you speak?" I hesitated. "When it's your own family," I finally said, "protection feels like betrayal." "Until it saves a life." She nodded. "That's exactly what we need to hear." On Sunday, the pastor from Malus's church stood before his congregation and said, "We were wrong. We believed charm over truth. We judged a daughter by the silence of her scars." I didn't go. But I heard about it. That was enough. Late one evening, Bryn sat beside me on the couch while the kids played on the rug. I was flipping through digital copies of court transcripts when the call came through. Seraphine answered. "She's filed an appeal," our lawyer said, "and she's requesting direct contact with you." I looked out the window. Our daughter was twirling in the yard, her brothers chasing bubbles behind her. They laughed like nothing had ever happened, like the sun always rose just for them. "No," I whispered. "She made her case in court." I hung up. And then I whispered to myself, because I needed to hear it again. Forgiveness isn't always part of healing. Sometimes it's the fence you never lower again. Link to next chapter. Forgiveness isn't always part of healing. Sometimes it's the fence you never lower again. The silence came first. No more letters, no new voicemails from correctional facilities. The house echoed in ways it hadn't before, not from emptiness, but from clarity. The kind of stillness you don't notice until the noise disappears for good. I found myself walking slower through the rooms, not from fatigue, but from unfamiliar calm. There was no voice behind me commenting on my parenting, no uninvited suggestions in the middle of bedtime routines, no one watching me raise my own children like I was just renting them. Sometimes peace feels foreign when chaos raised you. We started family therapy every Thursday afternoon. Bryn and I sat in the corner as the kids drew on butcher paper, their markers rolling off the edge of the table. What struck me first was what didn't appear. No shadows, no figures outside the frame, no duplicate mommies in the corner. One week, my daughter handed me a picture. Our house, our family. "Everyone belongs," she said. Later, in my solo session, I told the therapist, it wasn't their sentence that gave me peace. It was choosing not to answer when they called. She didn't write anything down. She just said, "You didn't break the family, Narina. You broke the silence." And somehow, that felt more powerful. The grocery store was the same as always. Fluorescent lights, carts with squeaky wheels, children asking for cereal with cartoon characters. I turned a corner and bumped into Mrs. Clausen, the widow from 3 doors down. "I always thought your mother had such grace," she said quietly, studying my face. "But now I wonder if I mistook control for elegance." I didn't flinch. I used to do the same. We parted ways. I bought oranges and milk. That night, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside were letters I wrote as a teenager. Angry letters, lonely ones, hopeful ones too. Letters to Malus, to Astral, some to myself. None of them were ever mailed. I read the first one, then stopped. I didn't need to read them to know what they said. I took the whole stack to the fire pit out back and lit the corner of one envelope. The rest followed like dry leaves. The next morning, my daughter was invited to her first sleepover since everything happened. I hesitated. Not because I didn't trust the family, because I wasn't sure I trusted the world yet. But I said yes, with a list of instructions taped to her bag and a phone number repeated 3 times. As she zipped up her jacket, she said, "I'm glad you say no sometimes. It makes your yes feel safe." And that cracked me open in the softest, most devastating way. That evening, a final update came through from Seraphine. The judge had denied Malus and Astral's parole appeal. They're to complete full psychological assessments and provide written public restitution before reapplication, she said. No parole for at least 10 years. I didn't celebrate. I smiled, but it wasn't vindication. It was clarity. That night, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she curled close and whispered, "Do you think they'll try again when I'm older?" I looked at her, the softness in her cheeks, the strength in her voice. "Not if I do my job right," I whispered. Link to next chapter. Protecting them wasn't the end. Teaching them to protect themselves. That's the legacy I want. The podium was smaller than I expected. The room smelled faintly of paper and nervous coffee, community center beige everywhere. Parents rustled in folding chairs, clutching tote bags, notepads, baby bottles. The sign behind me read, "Parenting Summit, Redefining Protection." I adjusted the mic. No script, just breath and backbone. "My name is Narina," I began. I'm a mother. I used to think love was giving second chances. Now I know love is drawing the line. I scanned the room, catching eyes already welling. Love is not possession. DNA is not ownership. And silence is not peace. They stood when I finished. But I didn't wait for handshakes or sympathy. I stepped down and left. By the time I got to the car, Seraphine had already called. I answered on the second ring. Final appeal rejected, she said. Full sentencing stands. 15 years. No parole. I didn't feel relief. I felt release. Sometimes justice isn't sweet, I said. It's quiet. It just lets you breathe. Later that afternoon, a letter arrived in our mailbox. No return address. I knew the handwriting before I opened it. 3 words, scratched in familiar ink. I still would. No apology. No reflection. Just confirmation of everything. I fed it into the shredder without reading it again. Didn't even blink. That evening, the kids hung their latest drawings on the fridge. One showed our family standing beneath a rainbow. Another had Malus and Astral, big red X's across their faces. I didn't correct them. I taped them up like all the others. Their truth belonged in plain sight. The following week was our anniversary. No white tablecloths, no reservations. We made pizza in the kitchen, flour in our hair, laughter bubbling louder than music. Bryn raised his glass of root beer. To knowing who deserves to sit at the table, I lifted mine. And never being afraid to flip it over if we must. We clinked. A few days later, I met a friend for coffee. As someone who'd watched from a distance, never asked too many questions. She sipped slowly and then said, "Do you ever think you went too far?" I held her gaze. No, I think I almost didn't go far enough. That night, I watched my kids play in the yard. No shadows behind them, no whispers in their ears, just joy, unfiltered. This is the legacy I chose, not perfection, not politeness, just truth, protection, presence. I don't regret the silence I broke. I only wish I had broken it sooner.